The first time the shadows counted, it was an accident. A power flicker at 11:48 p.m. in a small apartment where the hallway light had been left on out of habit, not fear. The kind of habit you don't question until the habit becomes the only thing between you and the dark. Camila was washing a mug at the sink when the lights snapped off. Not a slow dim, a clean cut. For half a second, the apartment was a black box. Then the emergency glow from the stove clock clicked on, faint green numbers painting the kitchen in sickly light. That's when she heard it. A child's voice, very close, very calm, counting from somewhere in the hallway where the light had been. 1. Camila froze with her hand still under the faucet. The voice continued like it had a job. 2. She turned her head toward the hall. She didn't see anything, just darkness. The stove clock was behind her, so the hallway should have been pure black. But it wasn't. The darkness had edges. Her shadow, stretched by the stove clock's glow, lay across the kitchen tile. And just beyond it, on the hallway wall, other shadows were visible. Too many and too clean to be real. Thin silhouettes stacked like cutouts, all facing the same direction, toward her. 3. Camila's throat tightened. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She listened. The building's electricity hummed back to life with a click. The overhead light returned, bright and normal, washing the hallway into its usual beige. The extra shadows vanished as if they had never existed. The counting stopped mid-number, like someone had been muted. Camila laughed once, breathy, embarrassed by her own pulse. Then she saw the smart bulb app on her phone, open on the counter from earlier. The last command log wasn't power restored. It was a manual action, lights off. Time-stamped 11:48 p.m., sent from her account. She hadn't touched the phone. She didn't sleep that night. She sat on the couch with every lamp on, trying to do the rational thing, explain it away. Power surge, brain filling in patterns, stress. At 2:17 a.m., the hallway light blinked once. Not off, just a dip. And from the hallway, the same calm child's voice whispered, close enough to feel on her skin, "Do not turn off the lights." Camila didn't answer. The voice didn't need her to. From the corner of her living room, where the lamp threw a long shadow against the wall, the shadow moved a fraction of an inch on its own. Then the counting started again. 1. Camila spent the next day doing the kind of rational housekeeping people do when they're scared and trying to pretend they're not. She bought new bulbs, replaced the hallway switch plate, and called the building manager to report a possible electrical issue. The manager came up, flipped the switch twice, shrugged, and gave her that tired look people reserve for tenants who watch too many horror movies. "Old wiring," he said. "If it happens again, call maintenance." Camila nodded and smiled because that's what you do when you don't want to sound insane. She didn't mention the voice. She didn't mention the extra shadows. She didn't mention the part that felt like a rule. When he left, she opened the Smart Bulb app again. She scrolled through the activity log with her thumb hovering, already regretting the impulse to verify. The lights off command was still there from last night. Same timestamp, same device name, sent from her account. And beneath it was something new she hadn't noticed before, a line the app shouldn't show unless you dig into advanced settings. Trigger, manual override. Her stomach tightened. Manual override meant someone physically flipped the switch. Not the app, not a schedule, a human hand. Camila lived alone. She tried to laugh it off anyway. Maybe the app labels power cuts incorrectly. Maybe the system is dumb. Maybe she's building a monster out of bad UI. That night, she overcompensated. Every lamp on, kitchen light on, bathroom light on, hallway light on, even the closet light, just because she could. The apartment looked like a set that was trying too hard to be cheerful. She sat on the couch with her phone face down and the TV muted. She didn't want sound in the room that could be mistaken for a voice. She didn't want to give her brain any help inventing patterns. At 11:48 p.m., the hallway light dimmed by a fraction. Not off, not a flicker. A tiny dip that made her eyes react like a flinch. Camila stood up slowly, walked to the hallway, and stared at the switch without touching it. She held her hands away from her body like they were guilty. Then her phone lit up on the couch. A notification from the Smart Bulb app. Lights off. Camila's mouth went dry. She hadn't moved her phone. She hadn't even looked at it. The hallway light went out. The kitchen light stayed on, and the shadows immediately changed their geometry, stretching longer, sharper, like the apartment had been remeasured around a new single source. From the hallway darkness, the child's voice counted, calm as a bedtime routine. 1. Camila backed into the living room, keeping the kitchen light in her peripheral vision like it was a weapon. Her heart hammered, but the voice didn't rush. It counted like it had all night. 2. She realized what it was counting, not seconds, lights. Each number arrived with a tiny change in brightness, as if the apartment was losing lamps one at a time. The floor lamp blinked once and died. 3. Camilla's breathing turned shallow. She grabbed her phone and saw the app toggles flipping by themselves, sliding from on to off like an invisible thumb was scrolling down her list of devices. Living room lamp, off. Bedroom lamp, off. Bathroom light, off. She tried to tap them back on. The toggles snapped back to off instantly, like she was losing an argument with something that moved faster than her reflex. The child's voice didn't sound excited. That was the worst part. It sounded focused. 4, Camilla whispered, without meaning to. Stop. From the hallway, the voice answered in her own tone, slightly flatter, like a copy that doesn't carry emotion well. Stop. She felt the air shift behind her, subtle, like pressure changing before a storm. Her shadow on the wall twitched a fraction of an inch in the wrong direction, as if another light source existed somewhere it shouldn't. 5. The apartment was darker now. Only the kitchen light remained, casting a narrow wedge of visibility. The hallway was a black rectangle. The corner of her living room looked too deep, too clean, like darkness with edges. Camilla backed toward the kitchen doorway and kept her eyes on the tile, because staring into a dark corner feels like an invitation. Her phone buzzed again. A new notification appeared, not from the app this time. A system message. Plain text. No sender. Do not turn off the lights. Camilla stared at it, and the counting stopped for a beat, like it was waiting to see if she understood. Then, from the hallway, the child's voice whispered, closer than it should be. If it reaches 10, you'll see what's counting. Camilla didn't move. That's the thing people don't understand until they're inside a moment like this. When you're given a rule that feels supernatural, your first instinct is still human. Obey it harder. She kept her hands away from the switches. She kept her eyes off the hallway. She tried to make her body small, quiet, uninteresting. The child's voice waited, patient. 6. The kitchen light flickered once and steadied. It was still on, but the brightness had changed, as if the bulb had been nudged down by an invisible thumb. Camilla felt it in her eyes before she could prove it to herself. Her phone screen showed the same lie of control, toggles snapping off faster than she could touch them, like the app was only there to give her something to fight. Camilla's mind did what it always does when fear gets too abstract. It grabbed for something mechanical. The breaker. Every apartment has one. A little panel that makes you feel like electricity is a decision you can reverse. She stood up, slow, and walked toward the utility closet near the hallway without looking into the hallway. Her gaze stayed on the baseboards and the floor. She moved like she was following a line painted on the ground. The voice counted again. 7. Her bedroom lamp, which she'd left on upstairs, went dark. The upstairs light spilling down the stairwell vanished, and the hallway turned deeper, like the apartment had swallowed its own depth. Camilla stopped in front of the closet and reached for the knob. Her hand hesitated, because opening the closet meant stepping closer to the hallway darkness. And flipping the main breaker meant doing the one thing the message told her not to do. Turn off the lights. The voice spoke softly, no longer counting. You want the pressure to stop? It said. You want control. Camilla swallowed. She didn't answer. The voice continued anyway, gentle like advice. Use your hand, no words. Just confirm. That sentence landed like a hook, a confirmation that didn't sound like surrender. A correction that would feel like survival. She opened the closet door. The breaker panel sat there, normal, gray metal, a cheap sticker with circuit labels. Camilla stared at it like it was a lifeline. She reached for her phone flashlight and stopped herself at the last second. The voice counted again, closer now, like it had moved without walking. 8. Her living room lamp died, leaving only the kitchen light. The shadows in the hall sharpened into thin vertical bars, like the darkness was organizing itself into a frame. Camilla's fingers touched the main breaker switch. She froze with her thumb on it. If she flipped it, every light would go out because of her. The house wouldn't be stealing control anymore. She would be giving it. The voice lowered, almost pleased. Good. You understand. Camilla's eyes watered from the pressure behind them. The urge to end it grew so strong it felt like nausea. She pressed her teeth together, fighting the impulse to make a clean decision. The child's voice counted again. 9. The kitchen light dimmed to half brightness. Not off, just weak enough to make the hallway feel closer. The shadows on the wall multiplied, thin silhouettes stacked like cutouts, all facing the same direction, toward her. Camilla felt the pressure peak, as if the room was holding its breath with her. She flipped the breaker. The apartment went black instantly. No moonlight, no lamp glow, no phone screen. She didn't remember turning the phone off, but the screen was dead in her hand like it had been drained. In the complete darkness, the voice counted one last time, no longer a child's voice, no longer playful. It sounded older now, closer to her own voice, stripped of emotion. 10. And something in the dark shifted position with a soft scrape that wasn't footsteps, more like a shadow sliding across a surface that shouldn't accept weight. Camilla stood perfectly still, unable to see, unable to verify, and realized the trap. The rule wasn't meant to protect her from the dark. It was meant to make sure she turned it off herself. Camilla didn't scream. She couldn't even find the air to do it. The darkness wasn't just a lack of light. It felt thick, like a blanket pressed against her face. Something scraped again, slow and deliberate, as if it was repositioning itself to face her. Not footsteps, a drag, like fabric across paint. Then the child's voice returned, no longer counting, no longer playful. Now you can't cheat. Camilla's throat worked, but she refused to speak. The message had been clear. Any response is a handle. If the lights were the first handle, her voice would be the second. Her phone was still in her hand. She tapped the screen. Nothing. She pressed the side button. Nothing. It wasn't dead the way a device dies. It was dead the way something is muted. A faint red dot appeared in the dark. The smoke detector. Not an alarm, just the tiny standby LED, blinking once every few seconds like a heartbeat. That dot was the only reference point in the apartment, and her eyes clung to it because humans will cling to anything. The dot blinked again. And in that blink, for a fraction of a second, Camilla saw the hallway wall. Not clearly, just enough. Her shadow was there, stretched long toward the hall. And behind it, layered over it, were other shadows that didn't belong to any body in the apartment. Too thin, too tall, all angled inward, as if they were leaning in to count her. The dot blinked off. Darkness returned. The shadows vanished. Camilla's breath hitched. She forced herself to slow it down because panic was oxygen for whatever was training her. The voice whispered, closer now, as if the hallway itself had learned how to speak. Say your name. Camilla pressed her lips together so hard they hurt. The voice tried again, and this time it used her tone, slightly flatter, like a recording that doesn't carry fear correctly. Camilla? Hearing her own name in her own voice from the dark made her stomach turn. It felt like a hand reaching into her mouth. The smoke detector dot blinked again. This time the shadows were closer. She could tell by the way their edges overlapped her own. They were moving between blinks, in the dark intervals, repositioning like they knew exactly when she'd be able to see them, counting with patience. Camilla kept her gaze on the breaker closet because even in panic, her brain wanted one simple story. Flip it back on, restore the lights, end the nightmare. She moved one step toward the closet. The voice inhaled softly like approval. The smoke detector dot blinked. In that brief red flash, Camilla saw something that made her stop cold. A handprint on the inside of the breaker closet door. Not in blood, not in dirt. In a darker patch of darkness, like someone had pressed a palm into the air and left an impression. 5 long fingers, too long, angled as if they'd been braced there waiting for her. The dot went dark again. Camilla stood frozen, listening to her own breathing, terrified to make noise, terrified to be silent, because both felt like participation now. Then the counting started again, but not from the hallway. From right behind her ear, in a voice that sounded like hers. 1. Camilla's skin erupted in goosebumps. She didn't turn. She didn't run. She kept her eyes on the empty air in front of her and whispered inside her head, not out loud. If I turn on the lights, it wins. If I don't, I see it. The voice behind her counted again. 2. And the smoke detector dot blinked, and in that blink, the shadows were no longer only on the hallway wall. They were on her kitchen tile, circling her feet like a crowd forming around a stage. Camilla didn't dare lift her head, but she didn't need to. The shadows at her feet told her everything. They weren't just longer. They were arranged, a loose circle around her shoes, each one angled inward like a crowd leaning toward a stage. And every time the smoke detector's red dot blinked, the circle looked tighter, like something took a step during the dark interval and held still when the light returned. The voice behind her ear counted again. 3. Camilla realized what was happening and felt her stomach drop. The numbers weren't tracking time. They were tracking progress, like a procedure moving through steps whether she liked it or not. She forced herself to keep breathing slow, but her lungs wanted to sprint. Her eyes burned in the darkness, drying out from staying open too long. Then the voice said, calm and close, using her own tone again. Blink! Camilla's throat tightened. She didn't blink. The smoke detector dot blinked anyway, and in that fraction of red light she saw the circle had tightened. One shadow now overlapped the toe of her shoe, as if it had stepped onto her space. The voice counted again. 4. Camilla's eyes watered from strain, tears she didn't feel emotionally, only physically. She wiped them with the back of her wrist without taking her gaze off the floor, terrified that if her eyes closed for even a second, the room would move. The voice whispered, almost kind. You're tired. You can rest. Just turn off the last light. The last light. Camilla stared at the faint red blink on the smoke detector. That tiny LED was the only constant reference, the only proof she wasn't blind, the only thing giving the shadows edges. Her heart hammered as the smoke detector chirped once, a low battery chirp that sounded like a warning someone had scheduled. One chirp, then silence. Camilla flinched because that chirp was designed to trigger a correction. Replace the battery, fix the nuisance, remove the sound, remove the light. The voice behind her ear counted again. 5. Camilla felt something brush her ankle. Not a grab. A soft pressure like fabric sliding against skin, like a shadow testing whether she would react. Her breath hitched. She fought the urge to kick because movement felt like permission. The smoke detector chirped again. One clean chirp. Her eyes snapped to the red dot. It blinked, and in that blink, she saw a hand on the wall near the smoke detector. Not a real hand. A shadow shaped like a hand, fingers too long, pressed flat as if it was waiting. The voice whispered, satisfied. Fix it. Camilla backed up a step and immediately regretted it. The circle of shadows at her feet shifted to follow, maintaining the same distance from her shoes like it was attached. The red dot blinked again. The voice counted. 6. Camilla's mind scrambled for options that didn't involve obeying. Turn the breaker back on. Call someone. Run outside. None of those felt clean anymore because the house had already proven it could control permission. It could open doors when it wanted. It could reset you into the kitchen if it wanted. It could make your phone dead without breaking it. The smoke detector chirped a third time, and this time the chirp sounded closer, like it came from inside her skull rather than the ceiling. The plastic cover of the smoke detector clicked. A tiny sound above her, the sound of a latch releasing. Camilla froze with her eyes still on the floor as something small fell. A battery. It hit the tile with a soft clack and rolled to a stop near her foot. The red dot blinked once more, then went dark. The room became even thicker, the kind of darkness that feels like it has weight. The shadows at her feet didn't vanish. They stayed because they weren't being cast anymore. They were there on their own. The voice behind her ear breathed out, like relief. 7. Camilla's eyes burned. Her body begged her to blink. Her eyelids trembled with the effort of staying open. The voice leaned closer, her own voice now, intimate, persuasive. Just pick it up, it whispered. Put it back, or take the cover off. Turn it off completely. Then the counting stops. Camilla swallowed and shook her head once. Tiny, like even that motion was a risk. The smoke detector chirped again, but now it was wrong, deeper. as if the sound had been lowered into something that could travel through walls. The voice counted. 8. The pressure at her ankle returned, firmer this time, as if something had settled there, like a presence crouching close to her feet. Camilla's eyelids fluttered. She felt the blink coming like a sneeze you can't stop, and she understood the final cruelty of it. The house didn't need to turn off the lights anymore. It only needed her eyes to do it for her. Camila felt the blink coming like a sneeze you can't stop. Her eyelids trembled, her eyes burning so hard it felt like sand under the lids. The pressure behind her eyes tightened until the urge to close them became physical pain. The voice behind her ear stayed gentle, persuasive, using her own tone like a lullaby. "Rest," it whispered, "just for a second." Camila dug her fingernails into her palm until she felt skin break. The sharp pain snapped her focus back for one breath. She inhaled slowly through her nose and forced her eyes wider. It didn't matter. Her body blinked anyway. In that instant of darkness, something moved close enough that she felt it without seeing it. A cold pressure brushed across her cheek, like fabric sliding past skin. Not a hand, not a touch. A presence passing within inches of her face. Her eyes opened. The shadows around her feet were tighter now, so close they overlapped her toes, and the voice counted again, calm and satisfied. 9. Camilla's throat tried to form a word, and she swallowed it. She refused to give the room a clean response. She refused to make it social. Her gaze stayed on the floor as she stepped backward toward the breaker closet. The utility door was still open, and the panel waited like a lever that could turn chaos into something understandable. The voice whispered behind her ear, soft and pleased. "Yes, fix it." Camila reached the panel and found the main breaker by touch, fingers sliding over cold plastic. Her hand hovered, because she understood the cruelty now. Turning the power back on was the most reasonable thing in the world, and the most dangerous thing, too. Every correction was a handshake. Every fix was an answer. But she also understood something else. This wasn't going to stop until she broke the loop. The loop was counting, pressure, compliance, relief. If she stayed in the dark, it would keep tightening until she did exactly what it wanted. If she brought the light back, maybe she'd get one chance to see what was happening and move on her own terms. She flipped the breaker back on. The apartment snapped into brightness so fast it hurt. Ceiling lights, hallway light, bathroom light, all returning at once like the building was pretending none of it happened. Camilla blinked against the sudden glare and looked down at the kitchen tile. The circle of shadows was still there. That's when her stomach dropped. Those shadows weren't being cast anymore. The room was evenly lit. The shadows should have softened, shifted, vanished. Instead, they stayed perfectly sharp, arranged around her feet like ink spilled on the floor in the shape of people. Camilla took one step forward. The shadows moved with her, not trailing behind like normal shadows, keeping their positions around her like a formation, maintaining the same distance as if they were attached to her body by invisible strings. The smoke detector chirped once, normal again, and its red LED blinked back to life like nothing had fallen off, like the battery had never rolled onto the floor. The battery was gone. Camilla's phone screen lit up on the counter by itself, bright white. No app icons, no notifications, just one line of text. "Do not turn off the lights." Then a second line appeared beneath it like a status update. "Counting resumes when you do." Camilla stared at the message, breathing shallow, and felt the pressure behind her eyes ease slightly, as if the system rewarded her for reading, for acknowledging, for taking the bait. In the hallway, her shadow stretched long across the wall, only it wasn't one shadow anymore. It had a second outline, slightly offset, like a delayed copy trying to catch up. And the delayed outline lifted its hand when Camila didn't. The fingers, too long and too thin, pointed straight at the light switch. From the hallway, in her own voice, calm and close, the counting started again. 1. Camila didn't touch the switch. She kept her hands in front of her, palms open, like she was proving innocence to a room that had already decided she was guilty. 1, her own voice said from the hallway. The word didn't feel like a count. It felt like a marker, a checkbox being ticked. Camilla backed away from the hallway without lifting her eyes, and went straight to the kitchen drawer where she kept tape, because tape is what you grab when you're trying to turn fear into a household problem. She pulled out a roll of heavy packing tape, tore off a long strip, and walked back with her gaze fixed on the floor. The shadow on the hallway wall had that second outline again, slightly delayed, like a copy trying to catch up. Camila pressed the tape over the light switch, sealing it flat against the plate, then added another strip, then another, building a ridiculous plastic barricade. The hallway voice didn't laugh. It counted again, calm. 2. Camila's stomach tightened. She hadn't turned anything off. She hadn't even touched the switch. The delayed shadow outline lifted its hand. The tape wrinkled, not because the switch moved, because the wall behind the tape flexed slightly like the shadow's hand had weight. The tape pulled tight and then relaxed, as if something had pressed through it and let go. Camila stepped back fast. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't want to look, but the buzz was designed to make her verify. She stared at the ceiling instead for a split second and caught herself. No, that's how it starts. You look for the source. You look for the reason. She kept her eyes down and walked to the phone anyway, moving like she was crossing a minefield. The screen showed a system alert. Plain text. No app. Hallway light, off. That was a lie. The hallway light was still on. Bright. Normal. But the count wasn't measuring reality. It was measuring the record. The voice counted again. Closer now, still using her tone. 3. Camila's throat tightened. She realized the trap. It didn't need to shut the lights off. It only needed to convince the system, and then convince her, that it had. Because once the record says the light is off, your instinct is to correct it. You go to the switch. You check. You fix. You answer. Camila forced herself to sit on the couch with her hands under her thighs. No fixing, no touching, no verifying. She stared at the carpet fibers, the safest thing in the room. The hallway light flickered once. The count continued. 4. The tape over the switch made a soft, crackling sound, like adhesive settling. Then the sound moved. A faint crackle from the bedroom doorway, from the bathroom, from the kitchen overhead, switch. Every switch in the apartment, one by one, as if the house was showing her it didn't need the hallway lever at all. Camila's pulse hammered. She stood up and walked to the front door, determined to leave, because leaving felt like the one action that wasn't a correction. The doorknob turned easily. The door didn't open, not locked, not stuck. It simply held, like the frame had decided to be solid. Behind her, her own voice counted again, calm and patient. 5. Camila pressed her forehead against the door and fought the urge to shout. She hated how much she wanted to yell, because yelling is an answer too. Yelling tells the room you're engaged. It tells the system it has your attention. She stepped back. The door opened an inch on its own, a thin line of hallway darkness beyond, even though the building hallway lights should have been on. The darkness outside her apartment had the same clean edges as the darkness that had gathered around her feet earlier. The voice dropped into a whisper, so close it felt like it was coming from inside her mouth. Let it go dark. Camila shook her head once, tiny. The voice counted again. 6. The hallway light behind the tape stayed on, but the bulb's tone shifted colder, whiter, like it had been recalibrated. Her shadow on the hallway wall sharpened. The second outline lagged behind it, then raised its hand again, pointing at the taped switch as if the tape was a joke. Camila swallowed hard and understood the new rule. It wasn't trying to turn the lights off because it needed darkness. It was trying to make her be the person who turns them off to stop the counting. Because if she does it once, she'll do it again. And the moment she does it 10 times, she won't be the only one making shadows anymore. The taped hallway switch started to peel at the edges, not from gravity, from pressure. The adhesive made a slow, wet sound, like someone pressing a finger into it and lifting it again. Camila stood in the middle of her living room with every light on, and still felt like she was losing ground. The air had that tight, organized feeling, like the apartment had been measured into straight lines. Her shadow on the hallway wall stayed sharp, and the delayed outline beside it kept lagging, then catching up, like it was learning how to move independently. The voice in her own tone came again, calm and patient. 6. She hadn't turned anything off. She hadn't touched a switch. That was the point. The count wasn't tracking electricity. It was tracking compliance. It was tracking how close she was to giving up and doing the thing it wanted. Her phone lit up again on the counter. Hallway light. Off. A lie. Because the hallway light was still blasting through the tape and turning the wall into a stage. Camila forced herself not to look at the hallway. She forced herself not to check the switch. She forced herself not to do the one thing every cell in her body wanted to do: fix the mismatch. Because fixing would be an answer, and the house had made it clear that answers were how it advanced. Then her eyes started to hurt, not from tears, from brightness. The kitchen light, the hallway light, the living room lamp, all of them began to feel too intense, like someone had turned the exposure up on the world. Her pupils ached. The pressure behind her eyes rose until it felt like she was being pushed from the inside. The voice softened, almost kind. "You can stop the pressure." Camila swallowed. "How?" tried to form in her throat, and she crushed it before it escaped. The voice answered anyway, like it had been waiting for that question her body almost asked. "Turn one off." Camila stared at the floor and felt her brain betray her with a bargain. One light, just one lamp. A small sacrifice to end the counting, to get control back, to calm her nervous system. She hated how reasonable it sounded. The pressure climbed higher. Her vision narrowed at the edges. The delayed shadow outline on the hallway wall lifted its hand again, pointing, and this time the finger didn't point at the taped switch. It pointed at the bathroom door. Camila understood instantly. The house wasn't asking her to shut down the whole apartment. It was offering a safe compromise, a tiny, polite compliance. A step that would make her feel like she was choosing. She walked to the bathroom doorway with her eyes still down and reached for the bathroom switch. Her fingers hovered. She could feel the house waiting. She flipped it. The bathroom light went out. The relief hit her so fast her knees almost buckled. The pressure behind her eyes released, clean and soothing, like a migraine ending mid-pulse. Her shoulders dropped without permission. Her breathing deepened. The voice counted, satisfied. 7. Camila's stomach turned. That relief was the reward. That was how it trained you. She understood it in her bones now. It wasn't trying to plunge her into darkness for fun. It was conditioning her nervous system to associate compliance with comfort. She flipped the bathroom light back on immediately, furious at herself. The bathroom light came on. The relief vanished. The pressure returned, sharper than before, like the system punished correction. Her shadow on the hallway wall split again, and the delayed outline moved half an inch out of sync, like it was getting braver. The voice spoke in her own tone, colder now. "Don't undo it." Camila backed away from the switch and pressed both hands against her temples, trying to hold her skull together. She looked down and saw her shadow on the floor, and for the first time it wasn't behaving like a shadow. It was leaning. Her feet were planted, but the shadow's shoulders angled toward the hallway like it wanted to go there without her. The delayed outline beside it twitched, then held still, as if it was learning restraint. Her phone screen updated again. Bathroom light. Off. It wasn't off. It was on. But the record said off, and the record was what the system was counting. The voice counted again, closer, like it had moved without walking. 8. Camila's mouth went dry. She hadn't turned off another light. She hadn't complied again, but she had. She had accepted the bargain once. The house didn't care that she reversed it. The step had been taken, logged, and now the count advanced on its own. She stumbled back to the couch and sat hard with her hands under her thighs, trying to remove her body from the loop. No more switches, no more bargains, no more corrections. The hallway light flickered once, and the tape over the switch made a soft tearing sound, like it was losing the fight. Then the child's voice returned for the first time in hours, very close, very calm. 2 more. Camila stared at the carpet fibers and felt the pressure behind her eyes rise again, steady and patient, like the house had all night to teach her one simple habit: turn them off. Camila sat with her hands pinned under her thighs until her legs went numb, because numbness felt safer than movement. The apartment was still bright, but the brightness had turned hostile. Every bulb felt too white, too sharp, like the room had been overexposed on purpose to make darkness feel like relief. The taped hallway switch peeled another millimeter. The child's voice stayed calm. 2 more. Camila tried to do math in her head. Because math is what you do when you're terrified and looking for anything that isn't a prayer. 2 more meant one of 2 things. Either the house would force her to turn off 2 lights, or it would manipulate the record until it could claim she had. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't touch it. The screen lit anyway. Bathroom, light, off. Living room, off. Both lies. Both lights still on. The voice counted softly. Her own tone now, stripped of panic. 8. It repeated itself like it was confirming the step. Then the living room lamp clicked off in real life. Not flicker. Off. Camilla's breath caught. She hadn't moved. She hadn't touched anything. The house had taken a light anyway and waited for her nervous system to register the relief that came with it. Relief did come. A tiny easing behind her eyes. A tiny lessening of pressure. That was the sick part. It proved the mechanism didn't require her hand. It only required her body to learn the reward. Camila forced herself to stand up, slow, and walk to the lamp. She didn't touch the switch. She unplugged it. The moment the plug left the outlet, the pressure behind her eyes snapped tighter like a rubber band. The voice whispered, close and disapproving. Correction. Camila froze. Unplugging was still a decision, still an input, still a way of participating. She stepped back from the outlet and kept her hands away like they were contaminated. In the hallway, the taped switch made a slow, tearing sound, and Camila watched her own shadow on the wall, because it was the only thing she could look at without looking into the dark. Her shadow lifted its hand. Camila didn't. The shadow's fingers pressed against the taped switch plate. The tape dented inward as if the shadow had weight. For a second, the switch didn't move, like the tape was holding the line. Then the tape tore with a soft rip. The hallway light snapped off. Camilla's body sagged with instant relief. So strong it made her dizzy. The pressure behind her eyes released like someone taking their thumb off a bruise. She hated herself for feeling better. The voice counted from the hallway, gentle as a bedtime routine. 9. Camilla's stomach dropped. She hadn't turned it off, but the house had used her shape to do it, and her body had accepted the reward anyway. That was the point. It didn't need her hand anymore. It needed her compliance to live in her reflexes. The hallway darkness deepened, and her shadow on the wall split again. The delayed outline no longer lagged by an inch. It stood fully separate now, angled toward the kitchen like it was preparing to walk. Camila backed away, eyes locked on the floor, heartbeat loud in her ears. The voice softened, almost kind. 1 more, it said. Then you can see. And from the darkest corner of the living room, a shape formed that wasn't a shadow cast by anything. It was a shadow arriving on its own, stretching toward the last bright switch, like a hand reaching for a throat. Camila didn't look into the corner. She didn't give it that. She kept her eyes on the floor and watched what the darkness did to her own feet, because feet were real and corners were invitations. The last bright switch was the kitchen overhead, the one that still kept the apartment from becoming a black box. Camila could feel the house's attention on it like a fingertip hovering over skin. Her body wanted to move toward the switch. Not a thought, a pull. The same kind of pull that makes you scratch an itch without choosing. That was the training paying off. The voice, still calm, still her own tone, whispered, 1 more. Camila swallowed and forced herself to step away from the kitchen, away from the only control point left. She walked toward the front door instead, because leaving felt like the only action that wasn't a correction. The front door opened, too easily. A thin strip of building hallway light spilled into her apartment, and that made her stomach drop because the house was not locking her in anymore. It was offering her a route that felt like escape. The voice spoke softly, persuasive. Go outside. Turn your lights off from there. Camila froze. That was a trap inside a trap. It didn't want her inside the apartment to do it. It wanted her in a place where she'd feel safe enough to comply, where she'd feel like she was choosing. Camila closed the front door without looking up at the peephole. She locked it. Then she stepped back and listened. Nothing. No immediate punishment. No knocking. No rage. Just patient counting energy hovering in the air. The pressure behind her eyes began to rise again, steady, purposeful. The house didn't need to force her. It only needed to make discomfort intolerable and relief desirable. Her phone lit up on the counter, screen white again. Final step. Kitchen light. Camilla's teeth clenched. She didn't touch the phone. She didn't want to look at the message again. Every reading was an acknowledgement. The living room corner darkened by a fraction, like the shadow there had inhaled. The separate shadow outline on the hallway wall shifted, no longer glued to her body's position. It leaned forward as if it had knees. Camila felt her throat tighten with the urge to say something, anything, to break the silence. She refused. A voice is a handle. She backed toward the bedroom instead because bedrooms have doors, and doors are things you can close, and closing feels like control. The bedroom light flickered once and stayed on. The bathroom light flickered once and stayed on. The kitchen overhead stayed bright, a harsh island of light. The voice from the hallway returned, childlike again, very close. 10 is where we start walking. Camilla's blood ran cold. Start walking. Not show up, not appear. Walking meant movement, direction, purpose. She turned her face toward the kitchen without lifting her eyes and stared at the tile line that led to the switch like it was a path carved into the floor. The pressure behind her eyes tightened sharply, encouraging her to move. Her body took one step forward without permission. Lag. Camila grabbed the edge of the counter hard enough to hurt, anchoring herself. She dug her nails into laminate and breathed through her nose like she was fighting a wave. The voice whispered, satisfied. Good. You feel it. Her body wanted to comply. Her body wanted relief. Her body wanted the pressure to stop. Camilla's mind flashed through one desperate idea. If she couldn't stop the counting, maybe she could change what turn off the lights meant. Maybe she could remove the bulbs, smash the fixtures, make darkness a mess instead of a clean step. She grabbed a kitchen chair, lifted it, and swung it at the overhead light fixture. The chair hit plastic with a crack. The cover shattered. The bulb inside popped with a sharp snap. Glass rained onto the tile. Darkness did not arrive cleanly. It arrived messy, uneven, with sparks and fragments and the smell of burned dust. The house went silent for a beat. Then the voice said, colder now. Not a child, not her own tone, something in between. That still counts. The remaining kitchen lights snapped off at once, as if the system had accepted the step anyway. The apartment went black, and in the darkness, the counting completed with a whisper that felt like a verdict. 10. Immediately, in the black, something shifted its weight in the hallway with a soft sound like a foot on carpet. Then another, then another. Actual footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving toward Camila for the first time. Camila couldn't see the thing that was walking, but she could hear the difference between a shadow and a body. Shadows don't compress carpet. Shadows don't carry weight. Shadows don't make that faint, dry sound of fabric brushing a wall as they pass. The footsteps moved from the hallway toward the kitchen in slow, deliberate intervals, like whoever was coming didn't need to hurry. Like it had waited all night for the lights to go out, and now it finally had permission to exist. Camila backed away from the shattered fixture glass, hands out in front of her, palms open, trying to keep her balance without making noise. Every instinct screamed to turn something on, anything. A lamp, a phone screen, the TV, the stove burner, a match. The apartment answered her instinct with silence that felt thick and satisfied. Then the smoke detector's red LED blinked. For a fraction of a second, the kitchen and hallway snapped into a thin, red-lit snapshot. Camila saw the hallway wall and her shadow, but it wasn't one shadow anymore. Multiple outlines stood there layered like cutouts, and one of them wasn't flat against the wall. One of them had depth, a shape pulled away from the surface as if it had stepped out of the projection. The LED went dark again. Camila's breath hitched. She forced herself to inhale slowly, because panic was the fastest way to make a mistake. A footstep sounded closer. The smoke detector blinked again. This time she saw it nearer. A tall silhouette in the hallway, too thin at the shoulders, head angled slightly as if listening. It didn't have features. It didn't need them. It was the outline of a person made out of absence, and its edges were too clean for darkness. The LED went dark. Camila turned toward the breaker closet by instinct, because the breaker was still the only lever that felt like hers. But the moment she moved, the footsteps stopped. Silence. A soft, calm voice in her own tone spoke from somewhere behind her, close enough to feel on her neck. Don't run. Camila froze. She didn't answer. Her throat tried to make a sound anyway. She swallowed it. The smoke detector blinked. The silhouette was no longer in the hallway. It was in the kitchen. It stood 3 feet away, angled toward her like it had been waiting for her to look up and give it the satisfaction. Its head wasn't facing her eyes. It was facing her chest, as if it could hear the frantic rhythm under her ribs. The LED went dark again. Camila stumbled backward and hit the counter. The chair she'd used to smash the fixture scraped against tile with a small squeal, and the sound felt like a mistake. The footsteps resumed, 1 step closer, slow and deliberate. Camila reached for her phone on the counter without thinking. She hit the side button. Nothing. She hit it again, harder. Still nothing. The phone wasn't dead. It was muted like the rest of the apartment, like light itself had become a privilege that could be revoked. The smoke detector blinked. The silhouette was closer again, so close she could see the way it bent where a shoulder should be, as if it was learning joints. One long arm hung at its side, too long, fingers tapering into points that didn't look like fingers, more like stretched shadows pretending to be hands. The LED went dark. Camila backed toward the front door, feeling along the wall with her fingertips, trying not to trip, trying not to run, trying not to give it the satisfaction of panic. The footsteps followed, calm, and then something worse happened. The footsteps began to match her pace, not chasing, mirroring. 1 step when she stepped, pause when she paused, like it was synchronizing with her body the way the counting had synchronized with her nervous system. The smoke detector blinked. The silhouette lifted its hand, not toward her face, toward the wall where the taped hallway switch used to be. Camila realized it didn't need to touch switches anymore. It could touch decisions. It could touch the part of her brain that wanted to fix the dark by making a simple, correct action. The LED went dark. Camila reached the front door and grabbed the knob. It turned. The door opened an inch on its own, the same careful gap the house loved. Beyond it, the building hallway was dark, too. Not unlit. Wrongly dark. A darkness with edges like the hallway was another room inside the same box. Camila's stomach dropped. The apartment wasn't the only place the lights had been turned off. The counting had spread the darkness outward like a spill. The smoke detector blinked behind her. In the red flash, she saw the silhouette at her shoulder, close enough that if it had a breath, she would have felt it. Its hand hovered near the side of her head, not touching, waiting for the moment she flinched. The LED went dark. A voice whispered in her own tone, soft and satisfied, right beside her ear. Now you understand. Camila stepped into the hallway anyway because staying felt like surrender. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, the darkness in the hall deepened, and the footsteps behind her stopped. Then, from the apartment, a single switch clicked, not a real switch, the sound of a click, like an audio cue. And the counting began again, right behind her, no longer a child, no longer her own voice, something older, closer, and perfectly calm. 1. Camila stood in the hallway with her back against the wall, eyes wide in the dark, realizing the worst part wasn't the silhouette in the kitchen. It was the fact the hallway belonged to the same system now. 1, the older voice said behind her. The smoke detector LED blinked inside her apartment, and that red flash painted the hallway enough for her to see the door frame, the mailboxes, the emergency exit sign down the corridor. Normal building anatomy, except the shadows were wrong. They didn't fall away from light sources. They leaned inward, toward her, like the dark was forming a funnel. Camila took 1 step away from her apartment. The voice counted again, calm and satisfied. 2. A light above a neighbor's door clicked off. She heard the tiny relay sound, the soft pop of a bulb dying, and it didn't sound like a power outage. It sounded like a choice being made. A door chain rattled somewhere. A lock clicked. Someone moved behind a peephole. People were awake now, but not the way people wake up for a fire alarm. They were waking up the way you wake up when you hear your name whispered in the dark. Camila swallowed hard and forced herself to move toward the stairwell. Elevators felt wrong. Elevators were boxes inside boxes. She wanted open air, street lights, anything not controlled by one building's wiring. The voice counted again. 3. The exit sign at the end of the hall dimmed slightly. Not off, just weaker, like the building was taking one small step toward blackout. Camila reached the stairwell door and pushed. It opened. Too easily. The stairwell was dark, but not pitch black. The emergency lighting glowed faintly, enough to see steps, enough to make shadows sharp. That was worse, because sharp shadows were what this thing used to exist. Camila started down, one step at a time. Behind her, the voice counted again. 4. The stairwell light dipped, then steadied. The emergency glow shifted colder, as if someone had adjusted color temperature, making the darkness look deeper. Camila gripped the railing. Her palm slid over cold metal, and the cold felt contained, like it belonged to a different air layer. She kept going. 5. The voice was in the stairwell now, close behind her, not echoing the way voices echo in stairwells. It sounded like it was right at her shoulder, as if it didn't travel through air. Camila's throat tightened. She refused to speak. She refused to answer. On the landing, she saw a neighbor, a man in pajama pants, standing still with his head tilted slightly as if listening. His face was blank, eyes open, mouth slightly parted like he was waiting for the correct instruction. Camila whispered, "Hey," and the word came out before she could stop it. The older voice behind her paused for half a beat, like a system detecting a new input. Then it counted again, satisfied. 6. The man on the landing turned his head slowly toward Camila, and she saw his pupils were normal, but wrong in a different way. They didn't track her movements smoothly. They snapped into alignment like a camera autofocus locking on. He spoke in a calm voice that didn't fit him. "Turn them off," he said. Camila backed down 2 steps, heart hammering. The railing vibrated slightly under her hand, and the vibration felt like the ringing she'd felt in her skull earlier, as if the building itself was humming a frequency. She reached the next landing and saw another person, a woman in a bathrobe, standing still, hand on the wall like she was bracing herself. The older voice counted again. 7. The woman lifted her head, eyes staring upward into darkness, and whispered, "It's easier." Camila's stomach dropped. It wasn't just her. The building was now full of people being offered the same bargain. Comply and feel relief, resist and feel pressure. She pushed past them as carefully as she could, not touching, not speaking. She kept moving down. 8. The emergency light at the bottom of the stairwell flickered and steadied. Camila could see the lobby door now, a glass door with street light beyond. A way out, a normal world. She ran the last few steps, not sprinting, but faster than she'd moved all night. The older voice sounded pleased, close behind her. 9. Camila reached the lobby door and shoved it open. Cold outside air hit her face. Streetlights, a passing car, normal night noise. For one breath, she felt relief that didn't feel trained. Then she looked down at the sidewalk and saw her shadow under the streetlight. And beside it was another shadow that didn't match any body standing near her. It leaned toward her like a person taking a step. The older voice whispered from somewhere that was no longer inside the building. 1 more. Camila's chest tightened, because now she understood the last rule. It wasn't counting lights anymore. It was counting locations. And if it reached 10 outside, there would be nowhere left to run. Camila backed away from the building entrance and kept her eyes on the sidewalk cracks, because the moment she let her gaze climb, the streetlight would turn into a stage, and the shadows would become actors. The extra shadow beside hers leaned again, shifting its shoulders closer to her outline. It didn't need a body to cast it. It was its own body now, living in the space where light meets absence. 1 more, the older voice whispered. Camila's throat tightened. Her mind tried to bargain. If it's counting locations, then I just need to change location faster than it can count. Run. Get in a car. Get into a crowd. Go somewhere bright. Find a place where shadows get lost. She turned and ran toward the main road. The streetlights ahead began to dim in sequence as she moved, not shutting off all at once, but dipping as if someone was lowering a slider step by step. It wasn't a blackout. It was tracking. Camila reached the corner and almost collided with a couple walking a dog. The dog stopped and stared at her without barking, ears forward, body rigid like it was listening to something humans couldn't hear. The couple smiled politely, then the man's mouth moved, and Camila's own voice came out of him, calm and tired. "Stop running. You're making it count faster." Camila stumbled back, breath punching out of her. She didn't reply. She kept moving. The older voice whispered in her ear again, close as breath. 10. The word didn't feel like a number. It felt like a latch closing. Every street light on the block went out at once. Darkness didn't crash down. It settled, controlled and heavy, like a lid placed over the street. Car headlights in the distance looked farther away, muffled behind a layer of wrongness. Even the neon sign of the diner across the road dimmed to a faint ghost of itself. Camila stopped running because her body stopped her. Not paralysis lag. The delay between intention and movement stretched until she felt late to her own decisions. In the dark, she heard footsteps on the sidewalk, slow, deliberate, heavy enough to compress concrete in her imagination, even if concrete doesn't compress. The footsteps weren't behind her anymore. They were around her, shifting position the way the shadows had circled her feet in the kitchen. Camila clenched her teeth and forced herself to speak the only thing that felt like a weapon. No. The older voice answered immediately in her own tone, flatter, corrected. No. Her word wasn't hers anymore. It had been copied and stripped of emotion like a file being cleaned. The footsteps stopped. For one long second, there was only her breathing and the faint hum of a city that didn't know it had been muted. Then the streetlights clicked back on, bright and normal, like nothing happened. Cars passed. The couple with the dog continued walking. The dog's tail wagged. A laugh drifted from the diner. The world resumed its performance. Camila stood under the streetlight, shaking, staring at her own shadow. It looked normal again. But when she lifted her hand, her shadow lifted its hand a fraction of a second late. Lag. Camila's stomach dropped because she understood the final aftershock. The counting wasn't a haunting. It was calibration, a system training her nervous system to associate darkness with procedure and light with control until her body responded on command. The older voice didn't whisper anymore. It didn't need to. Her phone, which had been muted all night, lit up in her pocket with a single notification, plain text, no app. Counting enabled. Camila stared at the words until they blurred, then looked away on purpose because she finally understood what "do not turn off the lights" really meant. It wasn't a superstition. It was the only way to keep the shadows from learning how to walk.